Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. Last week, India thwarted Pakistan and China's attempts to get the UNSC to condemn the revocation of the changed status of Jammu and Kashmir. India has conveyed that revocation of special status for J&K was a preventive measure designed to stop terrorists from bleeding the Indian people. We're now joined by the man who led India's charge at the UN and also in front of international media, India's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations, Syed Akbaruddin. Mr. Akbaruddin, thank you very much for joining the first episode of the Global Eye. We'd like to begin by asking you about India's strategy. Is this a point for concern that the UN Security Council is looking at the Kashmir situation, meeting in this manner on Kashmir for the first time since 1971? And would you also call this the biggest diplomatic challenge in recent times, perhaps since the Pokhran nuclear tests?
So first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me on your first show. And I wish you all the best in your efforts to try and popularize issues relating to international relations within our country. Because today, nothing is kept within the confines of boundaries. Trans-border issues are global in nature, and it's always good that you have taken this initiative to try and sensitize our people on the impacts and implications of every decision that we take, as well as decisions globally which impact on us. So I'd like to start with that. Number two, let's try to put this in perspective rather than to try and give it a nuance which doesn't exist. This is a closed consultation. By definition, this was a discussion which does not figure in the rules of procedure of the Security Council. The rules of procedure of the Security Council only provide for public meetings and private meetings. This is a step which is separate, which is an innovative effort by the members of the Security Council to discuss everything and anything. So let's not try and equate it with what happened in 65 or 71, etc., because those were different times. The tools available to the Security Council were different, and the options that now are available are different. So I think it's totally incorrect to compare and contrast situations which are entirely different. Now, coming back to your argument that is this important, issues of Indian foreign policy which are impinging globally are always important. There are so many issues of a nature which impinge on global platforms. For example, climate change. Climate change, what India does within our domestic boundaries has huge implications globally, both for the good of mankind and also concerns that others may raise. So let us acknowledge that we live in a globalized world and we need to act differently than what was the issue previously. Living in a globalized world means interacting, discussing, convincing people. And what you saw last Friday was a manifestation of that Indian effort that we are confident, we are certain of our approach, of our willingness to convince people in any format that is available, and we have very broad support for our thinking.
All right, and ahead of this UNSC meeting, what was the message that you sent out to various UNSC members? What was the brief sent out to you by the Foreign Ministry?
So, in such matters, the brief is very simple. For example, the Security Council looks after international peace and security. Our brief is very simple, that issues which relate to adjustment of federal arrangements within India, how do they become threats to international peace and security? Somebody has to explain that to me. It's obvious that our brief, which could be simple and cogent, had broad resonance. Administrative changes anywhere in the world are not need not be translated into international threats to international peace and security, because they are by definition internal in nature. That's the simple brief we had. That's the message we conveyed, and that's the understanding of the world.
Okay. Was the issue specifically about the revocation of 370, 35A, political detentions in Kashmir? Was that discussed by UNSC partners? Because Pakistan has been trying to put the attention on that.
Obviously, nobody bought this. The word that you mentioned was never even mentioned in the entire discussion. There was a stray comment also on that, but the broad resonance is pretty clear that this is not a matter that needs to be agitated in a forum like the Security Council.
That's an important point that you're making, that nobody even referred to Article 370. The fact that no collective statement was issued by all 15 participants, do you think that's a very telling development?
So diplomacy is the art of being nuanced. The lack of a statement is a statement by itself. Perhaps it's the loudest statement. People have to understand that institutions and bodies like the Security Council act in a very deliberate manner, take into account everything, and decide what they have to decide. So, as you said, and I'd like to repeat, that the lack of a statement is the loudest statement.
The lack of a statement is the largest statement. And, you know, we're playing out pictures of that briefing that you had done just after the closed-door meeting. You also went across and shook hands with the Pakistani journalists. What was going on in your mind at that point, Ambassador Akbaruddin, and what made you go across to the Pakistani journalists and shake hands with them?
I must confess that I had very little time for preparation, because there were no plans for statements, because once the President of the Security Council, in consultation with all its members, decided that there should not be a statement, we did not anticipate a statement. However, for whatever reason, there were some others who decided to make a statement or two. We then therefore thought that we should also place our perspective in front of everyone. As a representative of an open democracy, I was open not only to making my case, but willing to answer any questions that the international media would like to ask us. Sure, there was a large contingent of Pakistani journalists there, and I thought it was appropriate that I should respond to them. As regards going across and shaking hands with them, I think diplomats need to try and bridge differences rather than add to the divergences. So this was my small effort at indicating that India stands ready to bridge differences. We are waiting for a response from the other side. For example, I had said that India is fully committed to the Simla Agreement. I'm still waiting for a response from the other side to that.
Yeah, and you also told them that Pakistan needs to stop terror to start talks. We can start talks anytime, but terror and the cross-border terror needs to stop. Also, Ambassador Akbaruddin, if we speak about those closed-door consultations, were you surprised with the position taken by China, especially because Foreign Minister Jaishankar had briefed his counterpart in China about the changes, administrative changes in Jammu and Kashmir, also the stand taken by the United Kingdom?
So I will not get into what was said in the closed-door consultations, because I always use this cricketing analogy that what goes on in the dressing room is left best in the dressing room and not brought onto the cricketing field. Similarly, what are by definition confidential discussions of an informal nature in a conversational style are best left there. But that said, what has been told in the public domain, we have answered in the public domain about that. We don't think that this issue needs to agitate anyone beyond, because it has no external ramifications. If there are any, if people would like to understand better, we stand ready to explain to them, including to our colleagues from China.
All right. It seems, Ambassador Akbaruddin, that Pakistan is in this for a long haul, because today the Foreign Minister of Pakistan has made a statement that they could be taking India to the ICJ over this issue. And on the 9th of September, there is the meeting at the UNHRC. Would you also be preparing for that?
So let me say, what you saw on last Friday was only a small element of our diplomatic effort. It's just that I am truly grateful that I had the opportunity to say in public what is part of a bigger response that we have working through great diligence across the world. Many of our missions are involved, and the strategy and the approach is worked out by the Ministry of External Affairs and our leadership in Delhi. So let me assure you that we stand prepared to respond to any effort that is made anywhere in the globe in any manner. We are convinced of our views. We feel that there is a broad understanding of our views. And of course, everybody has the right to decide what they feel best. I will leave it at that, but to assure you that India's diplomatic efforts, you saw only a small part of that last Friday. They are much vaster, they are much broader, and they are working with a coherence that will only emerge when you see a response. For the present, it's better that it is subterranean, but what you cannot visualize or see doesn't mean it is not underway.
All right. And my two final questions. Does Pakistan have any claim on this issue at the ICJ at all, Ambassador Akbaruddin?
I'm not going to get into the legal dimensions. It's for the lawyers to answer. But I'd just like to draw your attention to the rationale that was adopted by the ICJ in a past case relating to the Atlantic. So I will rest my case there. The rest, we will see. These are speculative questions to be responded to as and when these come into being. We will respond to them.
All right. And my final question, sir, this is an issue that is going to play out at the UN in the next few days, weeks and months. How will India work towards restoring normalcy in relations vis-a-vis China, also with Pakistan, on this issue?
So please understand that our interests at the UN are extremely broad. I just hinted in some manner to climate action. So let us look at what the United Nations General Assembly High-Level Week is focused on during the period of, say, 23rd to 28th September. The Secretary General's primary focus is on climate action. India is a key player in climate action. The efforts that we are putting in terms of renewables, in terms of trying to address a whole host of climate change related efforts are going to be showcased there. That's the first effort. Number two, the area that is being focused on at the United Nations General Assembly during that week is universal health coverage. There is no country which has a more ambitious plan for universal health coverage than India. You are aware of the efforts that we have taken in the last, say, 12 to 18 months, and the plans for universal health coverage for more than 500 million families. So obviously, we have a primary role to play. Number three, the focus will be on financing for development. If you see the efforts that in the last decade or so that we are making, both internally to raise resources for development and externally to try and help our partners on development issues, it's just breathtaking. Everybody wants to know how is India managing its development transitions. So there are a whole host of issues that are the focus of the United Nations General Assembly. If, however, someone wants to raise an issue, they're welcome to do so. I've said this before. This is an annual itch for Pakistan. We know how to handle this. We will handle it in the way we've handled it in the past. We don't see that this will have resonance beyond what one delegation or a few others may say.
All right, I think you summed it up really well, Ambassador Akbaruddin. India has a bigger vision for the world. Pakistan may be obsessed with this, but we have bigger plans that we are going to focus on in the months and years to come. Thank you very much for joining us on the inaugural episode of Global Live.